the screen. And then when you're ready, you can say the invocation and start.
Thank you, Prabhu. Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 4. The appearance of Sri Narad. Text 1. Vyasa Uvacha Iti Bruvanam Samstuya Muninam Dirga Satrinam Vriddaha Kulapati Sutam Bravracha Shonako Bravit.
Translation. Upon hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Shaunaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned elder of all the rishis, engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows.
Text 2. Shonaka Uvacha Sutta Sutta Mahabhaga Vadano Vadatam Vara Katham Bhagavatim Punyam Yad Aha Bhagavanchukaha.
Translation. Shaunaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadev Goswami.
Text 3. Kasmin yuge pravarteyam stani vakena hetuna kutaha sanjutita Krishna kritavan samhitam muni.
Translation. In what period and at what place was this first begun, and why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile all this literature?
Text 4. Tasya putro mahayogi samadrin nikvilapakaha ekanta matirunidro gudho mudha iveyate.
Translation. His, Vyasadev's son, was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated on monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person.
Text 5. Dristavanu yantam rishimatmajamapi agnam devyorya paridadirna sutasya chitram tadvikshya pachati mano jagadastavasti sri pumbhedana tu satsutasya vivikta dristehe.
Translation. While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloths, although Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them made no distinction between male and female. But the sage made such distinctions.
Text 6. Katham alaksita purahe sampraptaha kuru jangalan unmata mukha jadadvad vicharan gajasahvaye.
Translation. How was he, Srila Sukadev, the son of Vyasa, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hanistapur, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded?
Text 7. Katham va pandave vasya rajarsir munina saha samvadaha samabhutata yatrisha satvati strutihi.
Translation. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him?
Text 8. Sago dohana matram hi greheshu grahamedinam avikshate mahabhagas tithi kurvam stad ashramam.
Translation. He, Sukadev Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence.
Text 9. Abhimanyu sutam suta prahur bhagavakatotamam tasya janma mahashtrayam karmani chaganihinaha.
Translation. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first-class devotee of the Lord, and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him.
Text 10. Sa samrat kashyava heto pandunam manavardhanaha prayopavistu gangayam anarditiratshriyam.
Translation. He was a great emperor and possessed of all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death?
Text 11. Namanti yatpada niketamatmanaha shivaya haniya dhanani satravaha katham shaviraha shriyam angadustayajam yuvesha tutastatatum aho sahasubhi.
Translation. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life?
Text 12. Shivaya Lukasaya Bhavaya Bhutayaye Ya Uttamaso Lokaparayana Janaha Jivanti Natmarathamaso Parashrayam Momocha Nirvidya Kutaha Kalevaram.
Translation. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the Emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was the shelter for others?
Text 13. Tat sarvam naha samkashva pristoyad iha kinchana manyetvam vishaye vacham snatam anyatra chandasat.
Translation. We know that you are expert in the meaning of explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you.
Text 14. Sutta uvacha dvapare samunu prapte tritaye yuga paryaye jataha parasharad yogi vasavyam kalaya hare.
Translation. Sutta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parasara in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu.
Text 15. Sa kadachit sarasavatya upsapsrasya jalam suchihi vivikta eka asina uditera vimandale.
Translation. Once upon a time, he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution in the waters of the Sarasvati and sat alone to concentrate.
Text 16. Paravarajna sarishi kalena vyaktaram hasa yuga dharma vyatikaram praptam bhuvi yuge yuge.
Translation. The great sage Vyasadeva saw anomalies in the duties of the millennium. This happens on the earth in different ages due to the unseen force of time. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the opportunity to recite.
Thank you. That was lovely, very clear, and very nicely recited. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Nice to be able to see you all too. Hare Krishna. So dear devotees, welcome to today's chat session, Chat Plus, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 1, Chapter number 4, entitled The Appearance of Sri Narada. So today we'll be studying and discussing text number 11. Just bear with me while I bring up the verse. Okay. So I'll share my screen. I didn't have time to make any slides today, so we shall just speak. So before we recite, we'll chant the Mangala Charanam prayers. Please join in behind muted mics also. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunvalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivashari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadi Shatarini. So text number 11. So very quickly, the context of this verse. Most of us are familiar. After asking the 6 questions, the sages at Naimisharanya wanted to know more about the history of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in this regard, they asked further questions. The first question is related to Shukadev Goswami, about his history, who he was, and his qualities. And it was beautiful hearing that. Then they turned to want to know more about Maharaj Parikshit. Previously, when we discussed, we said that that's very, very important for us. Because by hearing about these great personalities, about their qualities, their history, and so on, we develop a relationship. We feel some connection with these great personalities. And when we feel that connection, just like, for example, Srila Prabhupada, there are people who may read Srila Prabhupada's books, but because they don't feel any connection with Srila Prabhupada, not knowing his history and so on, they may not have as much faith, as much as love and appreciation for Srila Prabhupada's words. But those who understand Srila Prabhupada's life and so on, when they read and hear Srila Prabhupada's works, they feel a connection. They feel Srila Prabhupada's sacrifice. They feel about Srila Prabhupada's history. And that helps in our connection with Srila Prabhupada. My Guru Maharaj once personally told me that no one can really understand Srila Prabhupada without understanding the history of ISKCON. And therefore it is important that the devotees read Srimad Prabhupada Lilamrita. Because by reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, we find out so much about Srila Prabhupada's struggles and his dealings, his personality. So in the same way, we are now reading about Parikshit Maharaj. It's wonderful. Namanti yat padaniketam atmana Shivaya antya dhanani satravaha Katam savira shriyam angadush yajam yuyai vatsatuts sratuvam haho sahashubhi. So the synonyms, word for word synonyms: namanti, bow down; yat pada, whose feet; nikitam, under; atmanaha, own; shivaya, welfare; aniya, used to bring about; dhanani, wealth; shastrava, enemies; katam, for what reason; sa, he; viraha, the chivalrous; shriyam, opulences; anga, O Sutta Goswami; dustyajam, insuperable; yuva, in full youth; aisata, desired; uchrashtum, to give up; aho, exclamation; saha, within; a subi, life. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? Purport. There was nothing undesirable in his life. He was quite a young man and could enjoy life with power and opulence. So there was no question of retiring from active life. There was no difficulty in collecting the state taxes because he was so powerful and chivalrous that even his enemies would come to him and bow down at his feet and surrender all wealth for their own benefit. Maharaj Parikshit was a pious king. He conquered his enemies, and therefore the kingdom was full of prosperity. There was enough milk, grain, and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. So materially, everything was satisfactory. Therefore, there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were eager to hear all about this. So this is a very nice verse. And we see something wonderful about the Srimad Bhagavatam. Normally, if there was a speaker addressing an audience, there would be something said about the speaker, because the speaker is given more prominence and nothing is really said about the audience. It's the speaker who gets the limelight. But we see in Srimad Bhagavatam that Maharaj Parikshit is also being glorified very nicely. Why? Because we know of the 9 items of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, and so on, Padasevanam, Archanam, Dasyam, that Maharaj Parikshit embodies one achieving perfection through Shravanam. We also know, as described in some previous verses, that he was a great devotee. One very interesting aspect we see in Srimad Bhagavatam, that Vedavyas, he explains the Bhagavatam in a way that shows that bhakti triumphs everything. Normally, in various scriptures, it's the renunciants, the sannyasis, those who have no possessions, that are glorified. But here we see a king, a householder, being glorified in such a beautiful way. Because normally a king is not considered to be a very palatable situation. Like once a Muni was asked to give blessings to different people, to give blessings to a prince, to give blessings to a butcher, to give blessings to a brahmachari, and to give blessings to a devotee. So to the brahmachari, he said, you die right now. Why? Because you're performing so much austerities. Now you should enjoy the benefit of your austerities. For the butcher, he said, your blessing is you neither die or live, neither live. Because while living, you are creating pain and suffering for so many living entities. And if you die, you're going to suffer for all the pain you cause. So you neither live nor die. For the prince, the benediction, he said, you live forever. Because a prince has all facilities and is always enjoying. And to the devotee, he said, for you, it does not matter whether you live or die. Because while you are living, your life is all about serving and glorifying Lord Krishna. And if you pass away, you die, you'll be doing the same thing. You will be chanting the glories of Lord Krishna, and you will be serving Lord Krishna. The point being, princely life generally is considered to be a life of sense gratification. But those were not the kings of the Vedic time. In Vedic times, the kings were called Raja Rishi, saintly kings. Raja means king and Rishi means saint. So these saintly kings, they were known as Raja Rishis because they had phenomenal power and opulence and strength, but they were completely detached. Therefore, we see in the Bhagavatam, and how is that possible? That is possible through their devotion. And in the Bhagavatam, you'll see most of the great saintly persons, Maharaj Ambarish, Maharaj Bharat, Maharaj Parikshit. So many of the kings described in the Bhagavatam are Raja Rishis. saintly kings. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives some qualities of these kings. Like Maharaj Parikshit, he said that he had no difficulty in collecting the state taxes. The system was that the king, in his kingdom, there would be many other powerful personalities with their own kingdoms. But the king would send out his army to go and collect taxes. And normally, or it was often, when a king was not very powerful and strong, other kings would challenge him, and they would not pay their taxes. And then there would be a fight, a battle within the king who is challenging the authority of the king of the land. And there would have to be so many lives lost in those battles. But when it came to Maharaj Parikshit, it is said that he had no difficulty collecting the taxes because his enemies, meaning the other kings, they would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all of their wealth. And yet he said, for their own benefit. And this is quite extraordinary, that the kings felt that by surrendering to Maharaj Parikshit, by willingly giving their wealth, they would be benefited. Why? Because Maharaj Parikshit would never use the taxes he collected for his own benefit. He would give back to whoever paid their taxes. And Srila Prabhupada, or in our scriptures, we hear of the phrase Ram Raj, a kingdom being the same as it was under the care and authority of Lord Ram. And it was said here there was enough. What are the signs that there's prosperity in the kingdom? Firstly, there is enough milk. There is enough grains. There is enough metals. And all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. Full of potency meaning they give water, they give fruit trees, they provide minerals, they provide caves. It's not like in Kali Yuga, where the kings, their measure of prosperity is how much of oil reserves they have. What they call it, black gold. In Vedic times, a person's wealth was determined by cows, the milk they got from the cows, and the grains that they were able to store. And everything was satisfactory. So the sages, they're expressing some surprise. How is it that Maharaj Parikshit, such a great emperor, has no difficulties, youthful and strong, but which is all of these opulence very difficult to give up. And he gave it up, including his life. So this is questions all to stimulate answers. So this is a very important aspect that Maharaj Parikshit is displaying of the bhakti tradition. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said that renunciation is the ornament of a devotee. We see in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu such amazing renunciation that was displayed by his devotees. One very famous example is Raghunath Das. Raghunath Das was the son of a very, very wealthy man, Govardhan Majumdar. And he was the only son. But Raghunath Das, he heard of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he wanted to surrender to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And initially he ran away from home, and he went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, don't practice this markat vairagya, monkey renunciation. False renunciation is sometimes called monkey renunciation because you see the monkeys, they live in the jungle. They eat only berries and fruit. They have no homes. So externally, it seems that the monkeys are very renounced. But Prabhupada says we will see that the same monkeys, they keep 10 wives. So that is a false renunciation. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Raghunath Das, you go back home, you serve your father, you rule your father's property, you practice Krishna consciousness, and when the time is right, then you can renounce. And Raghunath Das would continuously try. Well, he went and he performed his duties. But after some time, he felt that, he couldn't live this life. He needed to live a life of renunciation. And his parents married him to a very beautiful young wife. And the parents thought, what is a stronger capture to a person than a beautiful wife? Everyone is enamored, and it's very difficult for any man to leave a home with a beautiful, caring, loving, obedient wife. But Raghunath Das Goswami, he was not interested. And after many attempts, he finally escaped. And I can't remember who it was, but it was his mother was telling the father, go and capture him and bring him back here. And the father said, he has everything that's needed to keep him captured. Everything that will capture an ordinary person. So what is the use of capturing him? So Raghunath Das, eventually he went to Jagannath Puri, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was residing. And there he would live a very renounced life. And he would get his meal only by standing outside the gate of Lord Jagannath's temple. And he would beg for a little Jagannath Mahaprasadam. But after a while, he started to think to himself, you know what, I am just like a prostitute because I stand here trying to solicit food. I shouldn't do that. So he stopped standing at the gate, and whatever came, he would eat. Actually, first he decided that where the Jagannath Mahaprasadam was thrown away, the old prasadam, he would go there and he would take some grains, he would wash it, and he would eat it. And once Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw him do that, and Mahaprabhu said, what have you got there, Raghunath? And Raghunath was hiding it because he said, this is not fit for you to eat, Mahaprabhu. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went and he took that grain. And eventually, even that he felt was not renounced enough. And eventually he would subsist only with 1 cup of buttermilk. Now, there's a big difference between the renunciation of the devotees and the renunciation of the other jnanis, karmi yogis, and the Ashtanga yogis. Their renunciation comes from their own efforts. Whereas for a devotee, renunciation comes naturally. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Jnana Atti Asuvairagyam Janam Chayat Ahaitukam. That means that for a devotee or in spiritual life, two elements are essential: knowledge and renunciation. Actually, in the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami says something very interesting. He said, when it comes to renunciation, neither too much renunciation or too less renunciation is good. We need just the right amount of renunciation. And why is that so? It is said, if one practices too much renunciation, artificial renunciation, then one's heart becomes very hard. And Krishna does not sit in a hard heart. Krishna likes to reside in a soft heart. And if one has too less renunciation, then one is very much inclined towards sense enjoyment. And Prabhupada used to say that Krishna is a family man. He likes to be in a family situation. So the artificial, the people whose renunciation is extreme, whose hearts have become hard, when they read about Goloka Vrindavan, about Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Mahi, and Krishna, and the gopis and the gopas, they can't relate to that family situation because they feel that their conviction is that in material life, there is family, there's social interaction, there's relationships. And because of those relationships, we suffer in the material world. So spiritual life means the opposite of that. But that's not the bhakti process. The bhakti process is simply by serving Krishna, by engaging in devotional service, automatically renunciation is there. So Maharaj Parikshit, he was a devotee from birth. And although he had everything that's being described in this verse, because he was a devotee of the Lord, he was very easily able to give up all of this. We see in the Bhagavatam even the example of Bharat Maharaj. He was the emperor of the world. Again, he had all facilities. And the Bhagavatam explains that just as someone goes to the toilet and passes and feels no attachment to anything, just leaves the place. In the same way, Maharaj Bharat, he was able to just leave all of his opulences and retire to the forest. It's explained that he was so advanced in his bhakti that he was almost on the stage of bhava bhakti, ecstatic devotional service. So this is an important lesson. There will come a point in our life where we ourselves will have to, not practically, because a devotee understands that nothing belongs to us, everything belongs to Krishna, but at least from a consciousness point of view, we should be able to give up everything. And this is a natural process. In his Madhurya Kadambini, Srila Vishnava Chakravarti Thakur explains that how even in devotional service, in the early stages of devotional service, the neophyte devotee develops sometimes a sense of artificial renunciation. And we see this happen so many times. Some person becomes a devotee. And the moment they become a devotee, they feel everything about their situation, their job, their family, their children, wealth, everything is Maya. And they reject it. And oftentimes we see such devotees, they struggle. They struggle in the beginning because of this artificial sense of renunciation. But renunciation should come naturally. As we practice devotional service, then naturally all of this will come. The interesting word is it's very difficult to give up. That which is very difficult to give up can be very easily given up when one takes to devotional service. And again, we see this so many times in the Srimad Bhagavatam of personalities. In the 11th cantos, there's the story of the Avanti Brahmin, who was very miserly. He had great wealth, and he could not part with his wealth. But when he realized the futility of hanging on to wealth, he took the devotional service. Naturally, he became very, very renounced, very renounced. So maybe I'll stop here, and we'll see if anyone's got any questions or comments or reflections from today's discussion. I didn't want to, the next verse is very interesting. It's related to these verses 10 and 11, but I didn't want to overlap into that verse because tomorrow, I think it's Mukunda Hari Prabhu will speak on that verse. It answers this question. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? So any questions? Oh, let me see if there's in the chat. Okay, there's nothing on the chat at the moment. Nice appreciation for Gita Mataji and Ganesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I'm sorry I did join late because I was playing cricket. So apologies if you already explained this, Prabhuji. But Prabhuji, did I understand this correctly? When you said that Krishna does not reside in hard heart, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And then you said about renunciation where, sorry if I didn't understand this correctly, Prabhuji, but when you said renunciation, when people are giving up everything, that is not what Krishna is saying.
Mm-hmm.
But then aren't brahmacharis actually giving up everything anyway, Prabhuji?
What brahmachari? A Vaishnav devotee brahmachari or a renunciate brahmachari?
See, this is where, Prabhuji, I think it's my bit of a lack of understanding, Prabhuji.
Okay, so maybe
when people actually are sometimes from Grahastha. Yes, please, Prabhuji, if you could explain a bit on that. Thank you.
Oh, you carry on. You wanted to clarify something a bit more. You go on.
Prabhuji, you know, when people are in Grahastha and then they make a decision, you know, when their kids have grown up, etc., and then they want to go and stay in the mandir.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So just trying to understand, and that's not hard heart, is it?
No.
Is it?
No, the point made, and the point being made by Srila Rupa Goswami, see, on the transcendental path, we have different types of transcendentalists. You got the karma yogi, who tries to reach perfection through renouncing the fruits of his work and to some degree work itself. Then you get the jnani yogi, who tries to reach spiritual perfection through knowledge. And then you get the Astanga yogi, who tries to achieve perfection through the Eightfold Mystic Yoga process. Now, all yoga processes require renunciation. That's a prerequisite to give up the material, to become attached to the spiritual. We have to give up the material. But these other transcendentalists, they have not developed attraction for Krishna. The other parts, the karma yogi, the jnana yogi, and the ashtanga yogi, they've just become accustomed to giving up the material. Okay. So when one gives up, simply gives up the material without becoming attached to the personality of Godhead, that renunciation tends to make one's heart hard. And the opposite of that, persons who do not practice sufficient renunciation on the spiritual path, they become sense enjoyers. In one sense, that also makes one's heart hard, because too much of sense gratification also hardens the heart. So Srila Rupa Goswami says, not too much renunciation, not too little. But now you were talking about the brahmacharis or maybe the vanaprasthas who take to renunciation either by joining the temple or becoming worldwide preachers or taking to sannyas. The devotees are different from the other renunciation, because whether one is like even a brahmachari reads about the loving affairs between Krishna and the gopis. Even the sannyasis do that. And they only practice renunciation. The principle of renunciation is if it can be used in Krishna service, we use it. If it cannot be used in Krishna service, we don't accept it. So it's a completely different type of renunciation. And the renunciation on the bhakti path never makes one's heart hard, but it softens one's heart because one becomes more and more dependent on Krishna. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Namrata Mataji. Okay, maybe she's dropped off.
Thank you,
Salesh,
Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. That was very clear. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Salesh Prabhu, you raised your hand.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. I don't know pronouns of the Prabhu, but thank you for a beautiful class as always. Just to elaborate on a beautiful points you made with respect to too much renunciation. Srila Prabhupada says, I think in one of his lectures I listened to, that also too much renunciation causes pride as well, for one to start having an ego and attachment to even the renunciation. You effectively become sort of proud of the fact that you're a great renunciate. So that's also a consequence. He also says very beautifully that for devotees in Grihastha ashram, for those who have created a devotional atmosphere with the family, the wife and the children, if all are engaged in devotional service, then actually there is never a need to renounce it, the family, because the family as a unit are all engaged in devotional service, therefore they're all devotees. And for a grihastha, there's not for a devotee, there's not a necessary requirement for surrendering a family in that environment, as long as they're all attached to Krishna and serving Krishna. Of course, that's a big.
Yes, true. As long as we see the family as the property of Krishna, then that's the beauty. And then the Bhagavatam stresses that Srila Vyasadeva goes out of his way to stress that particular point. And in one sense, you will see from these verses that Maharaj Parikshit is almost glorified in the same way as Shukdev Goswami. And these verses are displayed very nicely. Very nicely. Thank you for that point, Prabhu. Very nice point. Any other questions or comments or reflections that anyone has?
Hare Krishna, Vrindavan, Chandra Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances and grace to Srila Prabhupada.
Please accept mine or grace to Srila Prabhupada.
Always wonderful class. I was just, you mentioned that unless we read Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita, it's very difficult to understand, what Srila Prabhupada has done, and for us, how much sacrifice he has, for such a long time. I was reading, I've read once, Bhakti Chandra Maharaj's, the journey home.
Mhm.
And I saw how much, he was serving Srila Prabhupada in such a wonderful way, because he came very late into Krishna when Srila Prabhupada was here. And the way he was serving him, it was so wonderful. At the end, when Srila Prabhupada was really getting so ill, but still, at that time, how much he was holding Maharaj's hand and teaching every little thing, and the appreciation between the devotee and Srila Prabhupada was so wonderful. It's really help us, to really appreciate Srila Prabhupada's, mercy on us, and how much he has given to write this Srimad Bhagavatam for us to get in touch with this such a wonderful literature. So thank you very much for, you explaining so nicely. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
In the temple every morning, they read Prabhupada Shikshamrita. Srila Prabhupada wrote, I think, over 5,000 letters to his disciples. I have in my bookshelf the 3 volumes, Prabhupada Shikshamrita. And just by hearing Prabhupada's letters to his disciples,
Yes, they do in the morning. Yeah.
it is so relishable, and you really give an insight into the personality of Srila Prabhupada. And then when you read, and you think about Srila Prabhupada, how he interacted, Prabhupada had, in one sense, he used to portray sometimes his official side,
Mm.
and sometimes what people see, but Prabhupada also had a very wonderful, beautiful, soft personality.
Wonderful, so wonderful.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Thank you for that.
And at that time, when Maharaj was serving Srila Prabhupada, at the end, and Srila Prabhupada sometimes couldn't sleep, he would go on the roof and sleep there. And but so many people from all over the world, they came to Srila Prabhupada. They couldn't see actually coming in person to see, but they were at the night time, they were just opening the window and having a darshan of Srila Prabhupada. That way they felt so grateful that at least they could see Srila Prabhupada that way. So Maharaj was explaining so nicely, It was wonderful to read Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrita, and so we get connected, then we can understand this understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam, how much he wants to give us to the whole world, and how much we need to appreciate and read and preach. So Bhadra campaign is coming for us to do that, really.
Yes, true. I would recommend every devotee get the Prabhupada Lilamrita. It's been beautifully printed in Europe. All 6 volumes have now been printed in 2 volumes. I have 5 sets in my garage that I always keep with me. If anybody wants a set, please contact me and we can arrange for you all to get the full 6-volume set presented in 2 volumes of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita.
Thank you, Vrindavan Chandra.
Hare Krishna. Sailesh Prabhu, you raised your hand.
Yes, Prabhu, yeah, I was just going to make that same point that you made. It is, if anybody hasn't read it, it's a must read. Prabhupada Lilamrita is such a heart-wrenching elaboration of Srila Prabhupada's sacrifice. I mean, if people haven't read it, they have to read it, because we've heard the stories, but when you read the detail that Satsvarup Maharaj has written in that, when you look at each and every account on each and every step that Prabhupada has gone through, so much sacrifice and hardship for us, for just to give us what we have today. We owe it to Srila Prabhupada to read the Lilamrita, honestly, because we won't appreciate the greatness of Srila Prabhupada unless we've read that. Honestly, when I read it, we knew a lot of these stories, but when you read it, when you read the detail, it is just mind-blowing in terms of Srila Prabhupada's commitment to his Guru Maharaj's words, and it really is heart-wrenching. So
you.
thank you for promoting Srila Prabhupada's Amrita. It is a must read for everyone, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments? No? So thank you very much, dear devotees. All glories to your wonderful service of coming dedicatedly every day to read and discuss Srimad Bhagavatam. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyascha paditapanevayo Anantapuri Vaishnava Vrindaki Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bol.
Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Everybody. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.